Hey guys, GhazzyTV here with another Path of Exile video, and in this one I'm going to follow up my Dark Pact updated build guide video with a video trying to explain to you the specific mechanics surrounding both how the offensive and defensive output for the Dark Pact character on skeletons actually work. Bear with me, I have no idea how long this video will be, but I'll try to go through it as fast as I can, but making sure people understand it. And we're going to start with the offensive scalings of how... I don't
like it! It's shit!
Of how the DPS actually works in terms of the offensive scaling of the Dark Pact scaling build. So the Dark Pact is a spell that basically takes away a % of your HP to deal chaos damage, and then it will deal that damage. However, if you have skeletons, or a % of that is added plus the flat added damage, and then it will also chain. However, if you are casting this and you have summoned skeletons on the field, the Dark Pact will chain between skeletons and hit multiple times per cast. So one cast will then hit one skeleton, then chain X amount of times between other skeletons, and each chain will obviously take the HP from the skeleton it's casting on, but also hit the target, and it can hit the same target with multiple hits. So this is a pretty interesting ability to use, in my opinion. There are some really cool self-cast Dark Pact builds, totem builds versions that is using it on casting on yourself. I prefer the skeleton version, and I'm using a Divergent Dark Pact, which is one of the best upgrades you can start with when it comes to this build. The reason for that is because it makes minions recover % life on hit. The ability takes 8% of the skeleton's life to deal extra flat chaos damage as base chaos damage from that. But since it is chaining between multiple skeletons, only the skeletons that is the Dark Pact is coming from will lose that 8% HP, and all your other minions will recover 2% of life. This is why I more or less never lost my Golem, my AG, my Spectres, or skeletons versus single target. That's why the Divergent version is so goddamn good. On low budget, obviously, this will be the first upgrade you want to go for, but you'll be fine with it without it in the early stage of the game. So basically, the offensive scaling looks like this. I'm going to take off my Spell Echo. If I cast this once, as you can see, it only explodes once on me. Knowing that this only explodes once on me when I cast it is basically because it cannot chain to something else. However, if I summon some skeletons here on the field and I cast this once, as you can see, it hits several times. Multiple times it bounces and does this AoE effect on several skeletons, and as you can see, their HP is going down. Really important to note that despite having things like Blessed Rebirth, monsters created recently cannot be damaged, this is not actually damaging them, they are sacrificing their HP. So despite this modifier, as you can see here, they will still lose the HP. So keep that in mind. So if you precast versus a boss, which you want to do, you want to make sure that you don't precast too soon, because your skeleton's actually going to die before this boss is targetable. So that's basically how the build works. You cast skeletons, it's a 2-button build, you click Dark Pact, and it will spam this. However, Dark Pact can cost quite a lot of mana. In the 6th link, we don't have that much mana, so this type of build, in low budget, I would even arguably say that for people that are not used to the build, would use 2 of these flasks. But most importantly, it's the Enduring Eternal Mana Flask. For the very, very, very high budget build, which I'm playing on right now, you're going to want the suffix modifier of the Sorcerer, which reduces the mana cost of the skill, because this allows me to basically do this. And as you can see, on the mana number, it peaks up and sits on 152 as long as my flask is there. And as soon as my flask is over, my cast stops. So that's basically what's really important for the offensive scaling, is to make sure that you sustain the cast through an Enduring Eternal Mana Flask. And the reason we're using Enduring is because that does not stop the mana recovery when the mana reaches full. So you can get the entire duration of the flask whilst you're casting this ability. So that's the offensive scaling in general. Obviously, we have other things upping the damage of this build, such as the fact that we are low life, which I'll explain in the defensive segment of this video, therefore able to use Pain Attunement. We are using Spiritual Aid, which means that minion damage applies to our spell damage, and this is a spell build, which means that an increased damage of spells and spell crit multi, all of these things will actually affect our damage output, but also minion damage. Main reason for this node is because we are casting our Dark Pact on the skeletons, taking 8% of their life and adding that as base HP means that we want to ramp up the life of our skeletons. I actually have pretty low HP on the skeletons for this build with this budget, sitting on almost 39,000. So if they have 39,000 HP, they would add 3,120 flat added chaos damage per hit, obviously. So that's basically how it's designed. So we take spiritual aid because a lot of the nodes that gives us minion life, such as Lord of the Dead, for example, gives 15% minion life, which is a very big number, also adds minion damage. So this way we scale from both modifiers. Rest of the build in terms of offensive scaling is using Pain Attunement, like I mentioned. We have the crit cast speed here. We have intensity mastery because we want to have AoE when we're clearing, and we want to have better single target when we're fighting a single target. Hence why we're using the intensify support for this build. Other offensive scaling would again be more crit multis, and we also have withered. Either we have it on a spell totem wither on a low budget, or we have withered on hit through a glorious vanity jewel with the Doriani, so that we can get the corrupted soul from the glorious vanity. And the node we're getting withered on is through Ritual of Shadows. And the other one you can get if you want to get some chaos damage leached without needing that on gear would be Revitalizing Darkness. So those two would be the best ones you can get. Other offensive scalings could come from something like a Watcher's Eye. I am not using that. I'm actually using defensive scalings. And the large cluster in this build, which is actually kind of cheap. If you look at this jewel right here, it actually doesn't cost more than 40 chaos for the best cluster for this build, which is insane. Touch of Cruelty, chaos damage. We have Unholy Grace, which is cast speed and chaos damage. Unwaveringly Evil, chaos damage. And then the two medium clusters are minion life clusters with both Blessed Rebirth and Hulking Corpses. Now these gives a ton of extra minion life, which is why we're running them. Jewels should have life for ourselves, and then there are 3 different other modifiers that works on Cobalt Jewels. These are minion life, of course. You can have crit multi and spell crit multi, and other modifiers that works would be spell damage, minion damage if you use a minion skill recently from the Ghastly Eye Jewels, area damage, chaos damage, damage when you spell damage when you're holding a shield. So there's plenty of different modifiers on the jewels that can work, and these doesn't have to cost that much currency. Cast speed also is very, very important. So that's basically the offensive scaling. We also run the Heart of Darkness for more chaos damage and chaos penetration, and the Withered Mastery. So that's basically the offensive scaling that we're using and how it works mechanically. Other things that we can use that is extremely good for a build like this is cast speed is very, very attractive. You can live without the cast speed as long as you get some crit multi or crit strike chance on a one like this. But the chance to deal double damage whilst focus is insanely effective. That's the W skill, as you can see here. The buff lasts for 4 seconds with an 8-second cooldown. Once I click it, my character is now focused, and I will have a 19% chance to deal double damage for 4 seconds. Really good for circling down bosses. Other than that, having plus level of all skills helps a lot. Plus level of minion skills helps a lot for the approach if you're getting your HP up in your minions. And also the nearby enemies have minus chaos resistance on the helmet, and Dark Pact cast speed, extremely good. Same thing with the minion life category of just scaling that up as much as you can. Crit strike chance for spells. The boots for higher budget can run with Tailwind and Elusive, which works on single target, and you can have Onslaught for clearing on these boots as well. Rather expensive boots, but still, that's how you do it. Bottle Faith, of course. You can have Flask, like a Diamond Flask of Horse Life to get cast speed. You can have Incision Roll, which gives even more critical strike chance. And that's just a defensive flask. I will say this, though, which I'll talk about in the defensive version. Getting Chaos Rest is not a bad idea for this build. But basically, cast speed and minion life is the 2 big sources of damage output, as long as you get your crits sorted. Pantheon-wise, you can run the Predictable Chain to do maps with Chain, but normally I stick with the Cannot Be Frozen from Brine King, and I only switch to this for doing maps like Cortex in case they get Chain in there. The chest piece is running a base flat crit to spells, and then there is an additional curse which you actually don't need, because the thing is, when we are playing, we are self-casting Assassin's Mark curse, and we have our Animate Guardian apply a Despair from Cursed Despair on hit gloves. And the way you search for that is to put that little tilde mark and take Despair on hit implicit, and you want to have that at 48. At this point, you can buy these for a couple of chaos, and the reason you don't need +1 curse on your chest is because you can simply just go ahead and purchase something like a Windscream, a pair of boots. These boosts are well, actually, it's about 10 chaos, which lets the animate guardian apply an extra curse, so he can apply the despair together with your mark curse. And gloves can have implicit unnerve on hits and effective marks, as well as minion damage from essences. One thing I haven't mentioned is actually the benchcraft on the gloves, which is increased damage while leeching, which is insanely effective because we're never going to hit full HP with this type of build. You can have this on the amulet as well. And this kind of covers the entirety of the offensive scaling when it comes to this build. It's extremely effective, and it's just shits on everything. In the descriptions below, there will be a link to a video talking about the defensive versions, so scalings of how this build works in defenses. I don't want to take these videos to be super long, so I'll separate them in 2 videos. So in the description will be a link to the main build guide, of course, but also to the defensive scaling of this build. So if you guys had use of this build, or this video, sorry, or the build. But if you did, make sure you hit me up in the comments below, hit the like button, subscribe for more content. Until next time, stay safe, keep rocking.